I believe, said was the best city manager in the state. I agree with that statement. Please help me welcome Owasso City Manager Warren Lehr.
Well, I don't think I can follow that.
You double get it.
Okay, we're good. Well, I know I can't follow that. I disagreed with a couple of things he said there. You know, the fact is, it's everyone in this room. When you name any one person who did any one thing, whether it be a big thing or a little thing, there's always a lot of people behind that. And what you maybe didn't recall is I wrote in 2013, I wrote an email to the city council and said, hey, I'm here, I'm a good number 2, I'll help you through this process, I'll be supportive of the person who comes in, I'm really good at supporting another leadership, and I can help with the transition. And in my mind, there was a lot going on. I was looking back at the golf business. In my mind, I can hang in a year or 2. And then some things happened and some things changed, and I really believe it was a divine calling. About 2 weeks later, I sent another email to the city council saying, "Hope, strike that. I'm in this. I'm interested in pursuing this position." So I appreciate the council who showed support. I certainly didn't have the best resume for being a city manager. It wasn't anything that I ever really aspired to do. And it just turned out the way it did, and I'm so thankful. I'm thankful today for everyone in this room. This job, this seat, this position of servant to all of the citizens of Wausau is something I'm truly privileged to be in. And from this seat, I get to see things that not everyone sees, and that leads to an attempt every year to say, here's how it's going. But before I do that, I do want to thank so many of you in the room for your encouragement and support in the spirit of gratefulness and Thanksgiving. We're less than a week away. Sorry to spring that on some of you, but we're less than a week away from Thanksgiving. And not a week goes by that I don't get very sincere, heartfelt support from somebody in this room. But no more support from anyone than the young woman in the yellow vest there. Raise your hand. That's my wife, Nina. She has put up with me. I just turned 60, and when you turn 60, you reflect on a few things, and I realized that I'm a little more difficult to put up with than I ever thought at the age of 40 and 50. I thought I was a pretty good guy then, but I've now realized that I'm sometimes difficult to support. And through my count of 11 moves in the golf business, you plan to move a lot. 11 moves and 11 different jobs, if you count the different positions I've had here with the city. And somewhat by design, but through all that, almost 40 years, she has been my right-hand support, and certainly couldn't have much success without her. So we'll move on because I know I've embarrassed her plenty. This is another positive report, one that I hope will encourage each of us and challenge us. We're very fortunate to be in Owasso. Sometimes we take that for granted, but this is very positive. You know, I love quotes because they're like eternal wisdom. If you say something and people are writing it down 100 years from now, you've said something pretty important and pretty wise. So I've only got about 6 or 8, so and a couple of videos. So let's start with I think it's just about 25 seconds video clip from a popular TV show.
To make government officials more accessible to the public.
There is a disturbing lack of benches in Ramsden Park. I want to sit more. And another thing I like is the layout of the hiking trails.
I made this in one of your pottery classes. It's terrible.
Okay, so I don't watch that television show. I think sometimes it hits a little too close to home, but actually wanted to do a longer clip, but it was a bit irreverent in parts, and again, hit a little close to home. But it is illustrative of what's going on in our society that's I'll point out in a minute. It does speak to today's culture. Not Owasso as much as the rest of our country, but it speaks of our culture. We talk in Owasso about real people, real character, real community, and we try to cast a vision. As Yogi Berra, I think, said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. And while vision casting sometimes seems kind of nebulous and airy and out there and something that maybe we'll never aspire to, if we're not focused on something, which is real people, real character, real community, if we're not focused on something, we won't move better. We won't get better. We won't have any hope of arriving at what we call real community. In the past, we've broken it down into laws and principles. In the case of real people, the law of equality, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, and we talk about individuality, how we're all different, and last year we really keyed on respect. Our character initiative leads us to talk about the central point of our vision, our brand, which is real people, real character. I think it's central. I think it's key. It's really a key to what we envision as real community, a community where we are together, we collaborate together with one another, and we serve each other, and we gain satisfaction in serving one another. And in doing that, we're much more successful all across the board. So I want to look at a little bit more specifically the law of relationship. You see that highlighted there. We all know that relationships will make or break our lives. We were made to be with one another, I believe. And if we weren't with one another, character wouldn't be important. If we're just by myself, I don't have to have great character, but I have to constantly deal with people coming in and going out of my life. So it's important that I do that with good character. I like to point out, oftentimes, everyone's probably, maybe not everyone, because I'm getting a little older and the audience is getting a little younger, but most of you have heard of the book 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. Arguably the most influential and popular success in life and business book of the last 50 years. What most people don't realize is that the 7 Habits, as everybody refers to it, has a subtitle. If you look in the book, you'll see the Library of Congress subtitle is Restoring the Character Ethic. And I've talked about that before, I won't go into it, but Covey was ahead of his time in the early 80s talking about the importance of leading our communities, our organization, our teams from a perspective of high character. The Parks and Rec clip, we're going to focus today on communication and reconciliation, but the Parks and Rec clip was a little bit exaggerated, but it does speak to, I didn't even know this name existed, but if you look up outrage culture, you'll get thousands and thousands of references. It's been going on for several years. It's also called the call-out culture or the cancel culture. And the video speaks to that. People are outraged. We've gone from being offended and a little bit oversensitive to being outraged. As a society, we've gone from rudeness to meanness to madness. And we deal with people on a day-to-day basis that are angry, and we have to recognize that, and we have to look at ways to mitigate that. Some of you are old enough to remember the 1980s. This is not a totally new thing. Remember Eddie Childs? Eddie said, Eddie's company had a slogan, I'm mad too, Eddie, and I'm not going to take it anymore. But if you knew Eddie and Fran Childs, they were the most gracious, friendly people that I don't think I ever saw have an angry word or an outburst of any kind. but it was a way to drum attention for their business, because sometimes we all get frustrated. We all can be angry. So this isn't a new thing, but it's really been in the last 5-10 years where we've really seen a clear move from lack of etiquette and rudeness to downright meanness and leading to madness. We're actually rewarded in the social media phenomenon. We're rewarded online. You get more engagements if you're outraged, if you're rude, if you're mean, if you call people out, if we publicly shame people. That gets more attention. That's an unfortunate statement on our human nature, but unfortunately it often gets more attention. Outrage and offendedness are very common, and grace and forgiveness are more and more rare in counterculture. So it can begin to sound like this. Everybody's an idiot but me. I'm awesome. Go me. This was actually, I borrowed this from a man named Brant Hansen. He's actually a radio host. He wrote a book called Unoffendable. And in his book, he talks about people, and I think right here he was talking about how we are in traffic. You know how we are in traffic. That guy's an idiot. And he explains it by saying, that guy is always wrong because he's always that guy. I'm always this guy. In other words, everybody's an idiot but me. I'm awesome. Go me. When the truth be told, that guy is always doing something that this guy has done many times. Whether it's cutting in front of somebody or squeezing in or maybe stretching a traffic law, whatever the case may be. But there's also something even more important about today's world that we have to recognize, and that is we're in a post-truth era. So not only are we outraged, but we live in a time where dishonesty is commonplace. Put all this into the context that I really believe that we have something special in Owasso, and I'm not saying that dishonesty doesn't exist, but I think we are counterculture to our world in a lot of ways, but we have to always be considerate of what we're up against. And we're in a world where dishonesty is commonplace, truth is relative, and when there's no absolute truth in the minds of the majority of people, it's very difficult to tell what lesser truths are or aren't. Our world is such that there's not only not a unified belief in truth, but there's oftentimes very little respect for other people. And as our law enforcement and anyone in authority, our teachers, our employers face, there's oftentimes very little respect for any type of authority. And we have no real agreement on the value of a human life in a number of different contexts. And that's obviously very troublesome. And the problem is that today and throughout history, trust and order depend on truth and honesty. So if truth becomes relative and dishonesty becomes rampant and honesty is just every now and then, it makes it difficult for a society or a community to operate with trust and order. And I know I'm just identifying the problem that you're all very aware of, but without truth, commonly held values, honesty becomes extremely relative. If you think about this slide, it's really not that complicated. If you think it through, it's pretty simple stuff. I don't mean to be in any way speaking down to you, but sometimes we have to stop and reflect that we have a need for upholding truth and being honest. Keyes would argue further that social disconnectedness that we see because of our time on social media, we tend to have less face-to-face meetings with one another, and that social disconnectedness brings more dishonesty. He says not feeling, in his book, The Post-Truth Era, he states not feeling connected to others makes it easier to lie, which in turn makes it harder to reconnect. Eroded communities foster dishonesty. Dishonesty contributes to the further erosion of communities. We have people today that are strategically and professionally dishonest. We no longer tell lies, we misspeak or we exaggerate. And I use these words too. I don't like to say, well, I lied about that. Maybe I exaggerated something. Maybe I misspoke. Maybe I didn't intend to say it quite that way. Maybe I didn't realize I was exaggerating. but we say in the final analysis that mistakes were made. We don't say we lied, we say mistakes were made. And we don't use the word deceive anymore. We don't deceive people, we just spin things a little bit. Okay, so that's the society that we're in. So what does that mean to our pursuit of real community? Let me ask you a question. There's no wrong answers. You can tell by the slide, some of you, that what this question is, but let me explain. Truth or grace? We all err to one side or the other, truth or grace. Now, if you want to say justice and mercy, maybe that speaks better to you, but I'm going to have you raise your hand in a moment, but think about this. Truth or grace, which side? In our relationship and our view of other people, truth or grace? Let's say somebody breaks a rule. Where are you? What would those who know you say? Do I err toward the side of truth or toward the side of grace? They're both good. There's no wrong answers. So, the question, how many say I would err toward the side of truth? Okay, and how many say I err toward the side of grace? Okay, about even. Maybe a little bit more on the grace side. I've asked this question a couple of times and it's a little stronger on the grace side. I think we'd all like to think we're a little more gracious. As a matter of fact, in Oklahoma, in a very conservative state, we probably tend a little bit toward the truth side, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. So again, both are good. How many, make a little side point here, how many parents are in the room together? You and your spouse are both here. And of those, how many of you have kids? Okay, so a little learning point. If you don't have kids yet, you're going to find that one spouse is going to be on the side of truth and the other on the side of grace. Almost always. It's just God's design for family. It just works out that way. And how many grandparents are in the room? Okay, all of you are toward grace. So we get that. So both are good, but there can be a problem with either, because you see, truth to the extreme can be a bit rigid and harsh. Truth without grace can be judgmental, and it can be a little bit self-righteous. It can sometimes look like a religious legalism to some people. So not a good thing. The world, and we're right here in the Bible Belt, the world looks at legalism as very negative, very harsh, very bigoted, very religiously self-righteous. They look at it as, when we really side on truth, they look at it as us lording over them. Do what I want you to do. Do what I want you to do. And the flip side, of course, truth to the extreme is a little better than no truth at all. It's kind of where we're headed with post-truth, but it's got some problems. Very rigid, can be very judgmental. Flip side, grace to the extreme, it's kind of grace without any truth. It's a little bit soft and permissive, sometimes leads to self-indulgence, and can be compromising. It sometimes represents itself in a very, sometimes it moves to deception and moral compromise. It can be kind of do whatever you want to do. Those of you that were old enough in the 70s, you remember, I'm okay, you're okay. It was very much grace. Do what you want to do, that's fine with me. Well, that can be very permissive and compromising. So what's the answer? Again, better than no grace at all, which is kind of the offendedness and outrage culture. So at the extremes, it's not pretty. So what's the answer? It's pretty obvious. We try to balance grace and truth. And that begs a question that we're going to come back to in just a bit. What truth? Which truth? Whose truth? Okay, you all know that we don't all see truth the same, but we'll come back to that, so stay tuned. Regardless of well, I've got one more slide here, I'm sorry. There is a solution here with the balance of grace and truth, and that's in our real character undergirding principle of communication. We hold up truth, and in our principle of reconciliation, we extend grace. Makes sense, perfect sense. It just begs those questions: what truth, which truth, whose truth? Regardless of how we hold up truth and extend grace, which are good things, those things will move us toward real community, toward that third and ultimate rung of real community, the law of unity and the undergirding principles of collaboration and service that I spoke about. Real people, real character, real community. So let's move on now to what's happening in Owasso with projects, and we'll come back to some of that. What's going on now? Projects, projects, projects. You recognize this slide from last year. You'll recognize a couple of these slides because many of these are multi-year projects, but as you see things that I think we're going to have time for questions at the end. As you see things you have questions about, we have the people in the room that can help answer those questions. But just flying through these projects, this project was actually completed about the time that we had this meeting last year. Most people would call this the West Highway 169 Service Road. It's the road that runs from the south end, Rejoice Church and Rejoice School, up to the new Reesers. Beautiful project, about $3 million. And it was actually a public-private partnership. Michael Love from the Love's Convenience Store family, who's a developer, actually put $250,000 into this project, and it certainly spurred more development. Right across the way, this project was recently completed. Most of you have been there. It's just south of us here. Another great project, about $1.6 million to realign the service road where it meets the traffic signal that is now up right there in front of the new Come and Go, and I believe a new Harvest bank right there. And this has been a huge help for safety and will also spur development. Several stormwater and sewer projects, the two up at the top, the Brookfield Crossing and the Garrett Creek and Morrill Place sewer project, those are completed. The one there in the center that says under construction, actually be under construction in January. We just opened bids for the regional detention pond at the sports park. And then on the bottom, that's a Central Park and Lake Ridge stormwater project and the Elm Creek tributary Rayola Park. Those are waiting on permits, and we're working with residents and neighbors to see how those projects are going to move forward. Another thing we highlight every year, 1996, Poe & Associates told us we needed to spend over $1 million a year to keep up with our street rehabilitation and maintenance. From 96 to 2012, for various reasons, we averaged about $385,000 a year, but thank you, citizens who voted in 2015. We not only committed to at least $1 million a year starting in 13, but you also voted on a half-penny sales tax that went 35% for police, 35% for fire, and 30% for streets, the large bulk of which goes to street rehabilitation. We've actually, for the last 5 years or so, done about $1.8 million a year in street rehab. That, I will say, it's a little misleading. We have a long way to go. When we look at our streets, there's a way to grade streets, and our streets are about 77, 78, which is better than most communities. This is a case where a C is a good grade. If you've driven in other communities around Northeast Oklahoma, you realize the Wausau roads are pretty good. That's not saying that we don't have some challenges, but we're investing more into street rehab than we ever have in the history of our community, but we have a long way to go. If I was just judging our streets by today, I would say that they're okay. But in the next 10 years, we'll have a lot of streets that will become 15, 20, 25 years old. They'll, if you remember the huge construction boom that occurred in the early 2000s, we're getting ready to see some of those streets start to fall into disrepair. So there's still, we want to stay on top of street rehabilitation. This is a big one. This is great news. I like to call this project 76th Street North Widening Project. Well, there's an old saying, bell cow, but there's another word I'm looking for. But this is the epitome of, I hate to say this being a government employee, but this project has been the epitome of government bureaucracy and inefficiency. It's about 10 years in coming. We're doing everything we can do. There's a reason why it's been somewhat inefficient. We're taking advantage of federal surface transportation funds, which brings with it the adjoining environmental requirements. So we deal with the EPA, ODEQ. This also is being administered by our State Department of Transportation, which brings another layer layer of bureaucracy and oftentimes consternation. And so it's been a slow project. We've learned our lessons through this project, but it's getting ready to happen. Right-of-way has been purchased, utilities have been moved, and this is actually going to go under construction probably by April. So woohoo on that. Obviously I'm not a good woohooer, but we can really be appreciative of this project. Can't wait to see it get started. Garnett widening from 96th to 106th, and then another mile from 106th to 116th. 96th to 106th, the utilities have been moved, and we're actually looking at going under construction before the 76th Street project. Could be January or February, the 96th to 106th segment under construction. 106th to 116th, we're still purchasing right-of-way parcels, and that will be followed by utility relocation. There are several street segments that are going to be improved and under construction. We are doing our best to not have all of Owasso streets torn up at the same time. There's a strategy to that, but our growth requires that we keep up with this. Another exciting project that's been in the works for some time, but we've listened to the residents and we've heard different things. We've had some challenges with the bank stabilization at the pond at Elm Creek. We finally have a plan, and we are ready to go with the erosion control along the banks of that Elm Creek Park Pond. There's a significant parking lot expansion that you can see, a new shelter and new playground equipment that are part of this $1.3 million project. That looks to be under construction in March and hopefully completed by the end of the year. Intersection improvement projects all over the northern part of our city. The two at the bottom on 96th and 129th and 96th and 145th, those are in the earlier stages, the planning stages. The two right above that, utilities are being moved at 106th and 129th and 106th and 145th. Utilities are being moved, and that will be followed by construction in the near future. And then if you look up further to the uppermost right-hand red cross there, that is the intersection of 116th and 129th. This is a joint project with Tulsa County, and we're moving along there. It's still in the planning stages. And then the two, I'll say top left, those are intersections that we're working on as a part of the 5500s Vision Recapture funding. That is 116th and Mingo and 116th and Garnett. We're purchasing right-of-way parcels now on those, and we'll be moving utilities, and that will be followed by construction. All intersections I'm sure you pass through frequently, so looking forward to getting those updated and signalized in some cases. This is an exciting one. Fire Station number 4 Public Safety Training Center recently completed. Our response times to residents in the north and northwest part of our community have improved considerably. This fire station was much needed, and we also had the opportunity to build a training center that is already being utilized by not only our own police and fire and public works, but by other local agencies. This is just a fantastic project. Mark your calendar, December 12th, that's a Thursday. 4 p.m. there will be an open house. This facility has been open since March as far as the fire station. I think that's right. But the public safety training facility has been being completed in the time since. But we're going to have an open house on December 12th. Please come. We are not going to have a ribbon cutting, ambassadors, but we are going to do a hose uncoupling. So apparently at a fire station you do a hose uncoupling. So please come out to that. It's a beautiful project. And one, quite frankly, that has really put Owasso on the map in Oklahoma and in the Southwest. The police headquarters renovation, another exciting project. Our police were crammed into about 7,000 square feet. Now they have about the 27,000 square feet of the new old City Hall. You recall a couple of years ago, our City Hall moved to the old First Bank building, which has been a great thing for our community. We save millions and millions and millions of dollars on these two projects by moving out and into the First Bank building. We got a wonderful, I'll just call it a deal. We got a great deal from First Bank. I appreciate that very much. And now we have what I think is a 50 or more year solution for City Hall. And I like to say a 30 to 50 year solution for the police department, but the chief's in the room and he likes to say 20 or 25. So you can believe who you want there. But you see in the upper left of those pictures, we've got an enclosed sally port, which is huge, bringing arrestees in and out right there. It's allowing for some undercover parking, not having to deal with the rain and making transfers, equipment transfers and people transfers in that area. Some fenced in parking that you see in the lower left, and it's just been a beautiful project. Renovated plumbing, electric, HVAC, I mentioned parking, evidence storage, offices, meeting rooms, interview rooms, and that is right next to our Redbud Festival Park. Those of you that have been around a while and are up on these things, you know this is we're going to exhibit character. We've been very patient, and we've got a red letter date for you to consider next Saturday night, November 30th. We'll have a park preview by bringing back an Owasso tradition. Lights On will be November 30th at 7 p.m. It's also Small Business Saturday, so the small businesses in the Redbud District are doing some neat things. You will want to be there next Saturday night. We'll be finishing up the punch list, or construction company will be finishing up, and we'll be open soon, but we'll have a big grand opening ceremony most likely in April. Moving on, and you know, there's been 2 or 3 projects there that are super exciting that we could talk about for 30 minutes. New things for Wausau that have not happened in the history of this community, and we're just flying through them because we've become a little bit complacent. We take those things for granted, but these are wonderful things, wonderful projects for our community. Some other big projects upcoming, this with the Vision 5500's recapture, the widening and signalization and improvement of 116th Street from Mingo all the way to Highway 169. That is in the right-of-way acquisition and planning stages. Moving down to 96th Street, also part of the Vision 5500's of a penny recapture that you voted on in 2016. Thank you very much, is allowing these significant street improvements that are opening up development in our key areas, 96th Street and 116th. So phase 1, the west end, you can see where that is. I'm not going to spend much time on it. A lot more efficiency in traffic there with new signalization, right in, right out lanes, some changes there. We've worked with several of you as business owners in that area. There's going to be significant improvements. That's what everybody reacts to in the Walmart parking lot. There's going to be, as a part of this project, there will be significant improvements in the Walmart parking lot there, along with better access and better traffic flow throughout that very important retail corridor. On the east end, we are waiting on the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. We're looking at a diverging diamond concept for the Highway 169 interchange. If you've been to Joplin and been through that strange twilight zone where you get off and you start swerving around and you look at the lights and you say, where am I supposed to go? That's a diverging diamond. It's extremely efficient. It's much more costly, but if we can get it approved by ODOT and find a way to fund it, it is the only thing that will actually take those 96th Street intersections that you're accustomed to being delayed by. It's the only solution that will take those to an A and B rating. So it's not the end of the world if you have a C rating on an intersection, but if we can get the diverging diamond approved, that is a goal and a hope for that 96th Street Highway 169 interchange. So what is new in Owasso? And my apologies before you see this next slide. There are so many new things that some staff were watching these and we're asking ourselves, what is that and where is that now? It wasn't like our community development department. They know where all this stuff is, or economic development. Chelsea knows where all this stuff is. But as you can see, lots of new things have popped up all over the city, and we're excited about all of them. If your business is not listed there, my apologies. We tried to make some sense out of which ones we could fit on there. But welcome all the new businesses in Owasso. Owasso is still an attractive location, and we get inquiries on a daily basis for people that want to open a business in Owasso. And I can't go by this without talking about our Owasso Public Schools, the Lucille Ellingwood Morrow Elementary up on 129th East Avenue. If you've been there, if you haven't had a chance to be there yet or see it, it's a beautiful new school. I'm very proud of that. So those are some projects that were either completed or underway, and some new things happening. Now let's take a look forward to some things coming soon. You may or may not be aware of some of these things. You probably are. Emerson Nice Brewery in the Redbud District, Trident Aquatics right there by the 98 Apartments, S&B Burger Joint right there in Tyann, the Auto Zone up on 116th on the West Service Road. I'm testing myself, I shouldn't have started this. The Owasso Drug is a new location of an existing thriving business right there on 86th Street, and then of course the Jim Glover expansion to include Jeep. On your table you'll find, or in your seats, you found some Did You Know? I'm not going to go through all of those, but I did want to highlight just a few of them. We filled up two sides of that sheet of paper. Did you know that the city's refuse waste is transported to the Covanta Tulsa Energy from Waste, most people call it the burn plant, where our refuse is recycled into steam energy or reused as steam energy. We have quite a few people who'd like to see curbside recycling. One of the considerations that we have there is the fact that some years ago we committed to not adding to our landfills, and in 2013 we started taking all of our refuse to the burn plant, and it's reused as steam energy. So we're doing something good for the environment there. The enormous capital investment, the consideration for those people that you know that would like to have curbside recycling, the consideration is there's several millions of dollars worth of capital investment to have curbside recycling, and we're already have our waste being converted to energy. It's difficult to tell our citizens that every single citizen, every single household will have to pay $7, $8, maybe as much as $10 per month to get curbside recycling when we're already doing a form of recycling with our refuse. So that's something that a lot of people don't know. Did you know that when our public works director came here some 25 plus years ago, the city was treating in the tens of millions of gallons. Now we treat 1.1 billion gallons of wastewater per year. We completed a $9.7 million expansion in 2011, and we're now planning a $21 million expansion. The good news there is the city limits only go so far, so once the infrastructure gets out to the edges, the need for that type of expansion does slow down. There is a limit. Did you know that the city's finance department, this is pretty important, people get pretty, there was a great quote, but I'm not going to be able to come up with it, but there's nothing so scrutinized as public dollars. And when you don't handle public dollars well, it erodes trust in administration and government, just period. So very important. We've been recognized 3 years in a row under the leadership of Linda Jones and Jennifer Newman. They're both here today. We have excellent finance reporting, and at their initiative, at Ms. Jones' initiative, we have been recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association. I know you can read. because we have a comprehensive annual financial report. Now, if you ever hear CAFR, that's what that is, a CAFR. It's not a Hereford or an Angus. It's a comprehensive annual financial report. Very few cities in Oklahoma enjoy this type of confidence in their local finances. You can be confident in how we're handling your tax dollars. Did you know our Wausau Fire Department provides the city's emergency ambulance service? A lot of people think it's Mercy or Miller or IMSA like Tulsa uses. We don't use a third-party service provider. Our primary is the Owasso Fire Department, and 96% of our firefighters are also full paramedics. What that means is there's basically 3 levels of people that run on ambulance. You've got EMT basic, EMT advanced, and when you're really good, you become certified as a full paramedic. 96% of our firefighters are full paramedics. I would also add to that something important. Also now 12% of our department is female. That's not as much, to me, that's obviously important. Gender diversity is important, but when you consider that when you have an accident and there's your emergency on the scene, it's always wonderful if you can have a female EMS certified paramedic on hand to deal with your 14-year-old daughter or your 78-year-old mother or whoever, or you. So it creates a better opportunity for what some people call bedside manner. The national average is about 4%. We're at 12% right now. We have excellent female firefighter paramedics, excellent male firefighter paramedics, very proud. Did you know that our Owasso Strong Neighborhood Initiative has coordinated almost 7,000 volunteers and been either a winner or a finalist in the state's Keep Oklahoma Beautiful Awards for the last 8 years. The important thing about that is not so much the volunteer hours and the value of those hours, it's how many people have been a part of an Owasso Care Stay? Just raise your hand. Okay, a lot of you in the room. If you haven't, I tell this story every time. If you go and you'll see a young family, you'll see a mom and a dad, and you'll see a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, when they come back from that experience of picking up trash or painting a fire hydrant, they are ecstatic. There's a joy and satisfaction in serving that they might not be a Boy Scout, a Girl Scout, they might not attend a service organization or a church or a way to have that. When they do that, they're growing as citizens. So this program doesn't just bring value with our hotel tax fund dollars, it builds citizens. And the city has spent almost $37 million in the last 5 years on public infrastructure, limited to streets. It says including, but really the $37 million is for streets, water distribution, wastewater, and stormwater. Basically the public works side. If you add City Hall, Police, Department of Renovation, Fire Station number 4, our parks efforts, there's almost another $40 million. And there's currently another $70 to $80 million of projects in various stages. But overall, the state of the city is very good, but the state of the community will be what we make it. You've heard me use this terminology before. For those of you that knew, we make this distinction between city and community. And this actually would be a good time to recognize. I'm going to burden our wonderful city staff and our counselors with standing up so that we could recognize our city staff and counselors. Would you please stand, city staff and counselors? That's where I disagreed with Mayor Kelly. He used a singular, and we have a great organization because of all the people that just stood up. You all know that. You know that it takes a team, and we have a great team. I'm gonna do something a little different. We have some unsung, to use the word heroes, but we'll call them heroes because I can't think of another word. But we have people here on the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, the Sales Tax Oversight Committee, any other boards and committees with the city. Would you please stand up real quickly if you're on serving voluntarily as a city board or committee member? think there's a couple more out there, but we're always looking for city boards and committee volunteers. And I'm going to tell you what I told, I've said it a couple times recently, but I told Senator Dawson, Representative Van Kuren the other day, I've been fortunate to visit other organizations, especially in the last couple of years, talk to other city managers. There is no doubt in my mind that we have the best city staff, the best leadership of any community in Oklahoma, and I also believe we have the best city council, the most functional city council, the wisest policy-making body of any council in Oklahoma. There's a reason why things are going well. It's because we have a very functional council, a very professional staff, and we work well together. So thank you very much. So how do we get better? How do we win as a community? Not as a city, but how do we move forward toward real community with collaboration and service to one another? And I'm going too slow here. I just looked at my watch. So we have to be different than our culture. We have to be different than other cities. We go on the offense since this is football season, and go Rams, a big week. But we go on the offense by being counterculture. And in our communication, I mentioned we hold up the truth. In a culture of relativism and dishonesty, we hold up truth and we extend grace. In a culture of outrage and offendedness, we extend grace. I really appreciated Congressman Kevin Hearns, what he said when he was here last at this luncheon. He said, "My wife disagrees with me a lot, but I don't attack her personally." It doesn't work well. That is simple, timeless wisdom that expands far beyond marriage, far beyond any personal relationship. It doesn't work well at all, and we do that. We attack others when we get attacked, and you can bet on this, if you attack someone, you will be attacked back. And it just doesn't work, especially with people that have no commitment to you whatsoever. It doesn't even work for those of us that are committed to one another for life. So good, timeless wisdom there. What are the threats to real community? We know we need to find truth in common and extend grace, but we do have some things to defend against, and I've already mentioned them. Relativism, no truth, lies are now routinely accepted in political arguments and in the media and in literature. Fake news is actually a real thing, whether it's memes on social media or other venues. The line between fiction and nonfiction is very blurry, so we have to watch out for that. And then unforgiveness. This is probably bigger. Unforgiveness can be a sludge that gums up the works of your family, your team, your organization, or your community. We all have people in our lives at one point, if not now, that we have failed to reconcile with or failed to forgive. And we lose, quite frankly, we lose if we fail to do these two things: hold up truth and extend grace. So what ties these two together and moves us forward is this word, tolerance. It's a little bit of a controversial word. It's a misunderstood character trait, but the definition is demonstrating respect for others who do not share my perspective. Pretty simple. Understanding is more important than agreement. We can disagree without disliking. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can disagree without making enemies. On tolerance, let me point out, there's a big difference between acceptance and approval. There's a big difference between accepting a person and approving of their beliefs. We have to accept and love people. I know this is basic, but even if we don't approve of their beliefs, that's okay. We have to accept and love people. I love this statement. Tolerance isn't about not having beliefs, it's about how your beliefs lead you to treat people who disagree with you. So we have to ask ourselves, do my beliefs and worldview, do they lead me to sincerity, to compassion, to humility, forgiveness, patience, respect, kindness? These virtues, these character traits I just mentioned, they're universal, and more on that in just a moment. So here's the answer that ties everything together. In non-essentials, grace. In the gray areas and beliefs and practices in our personal interactions on social media or public discourse, we need to extend grace. And in the non-negotiables, truth. So, again, back to that question I alluded to earlier. What truth, which truth, whose truth? There are some universal truths and virtues. You might not even realize this, but I did a character introduction on virtue a few years ago, and what I found is that from the Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, from the major religions, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, and Christianity, there are virtues like honesty, justice, love, and kindness that they all hold in common. They're all the same. They hold them up, agree upon them, and hold them sacred. It's why a man named Paul from Tarsus in about AD 49 wrote a letter to a church in Asia Minor and listed a number of horrendous offenses, as he was wont to do in his letters. It listed hatred and murder and adultery and discord and jealousy and rage and envy and dissensions and factions. But in contrast listed love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then what did he say? He said, against such things there is no law. That's because throughout the history of mankind, there's never been a law against those things. That is the truth that we have to hold up. We might not agree on lots of other beliefs and practices and worldviews, but we can hold up our character traits. We can hold up those universal truths that everyone agrees on. There are no law against those. They are universally accepted. What can we do today? Just a few questions to wrap it up. Our Character Council and initiative, we hold up those truths, but how does that apply to us today? For one, is there someone who isn't like you that you've judged harshly? Someone who doesn't share your beliefs? Maybe you look down on them. A man named Bob Goff said the way we treat people is a report card on our life. And that is true. And on this subject, here's someone I never expected to quote, Demi Moore. When we decide who people are, we limit their ability to become who they can be. That was just on an interview on the news. I guess she wrote a book recently. I may not read the book. Perhaps I've judged her a little harshly, but we all have insights and gifts and life experience and wisdom to offer. This is an incredibly wise, great quote. Secondly, is there someone you're unwilling to forgive because of the way they once responded to you, the way they treated you? Somehow you've written them off because of a disagreement or a difference of opinion. Is there someone in your life? Even when we're sure they're in the wrong, we have an opportunity to remember when we were even more wrong and we were extended grace. Most of us have relationships, people in our lives that we've let control us. We've let control our emotions, and there's not any reconciliation. This quote speaks to that. Christine Kane, if someone has the capacity to make or break your day, you've given them too much power over you. It's never too late to forgive someone or ask forgiveness of someone. We all think we deserve to carry anger or offense with us in life, but if that leads to bitterness, it will literally ruin our lives, and at the risk of quoting Disney, you have to let it go. Is there someone in your family, your work, and your community you need to reconcile with? And last question for us, is there someone you can encourage this week? Back to where we started, I've been encouraged by so many of you, and many of you are great encouragers. Consider this thought from Carly Fiorina, the former Republican candidate for president. This was off of a podcast. I just jotted it all down, but this is timeless. We so often overlook people's potential because of their circumstances or because of their appearance or because they don't agree with us or because we really don't understand them, so we're suspicious of them. But the truth is, all of us have God-given gifts. All of us have more potential than we realize. As we wrap up, I want to show you a short news clip. I got this from Senator Langford's office on one of his social media updates. Senator Langford's someone that I greatly respect. And maybe you've seen it. No. Are we going to come up? Anybody have a thought on how this can come up?
Other side. Yep. Yeah. That way. Yeah.
Anybody want to take a shot at it? It's about a minute video. Good.
Hang on, help's on the way.
Is there a seventh grader?
Yeah, an 8th grader in the room.
Where'd it go? Did you lose the cluster mouse? There you go.
There's a mouse. Not getting it.
My glasses on. Oh, I think we lost our internet connection. We lost our internet.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this up. When you get a chance, just Google Ellen George W. Bush, and you'll see this CBS Evening News report. I think it's a minute and a half. Ellen says basically that this picture was taken. There was an outcry on social media. Had a lot of people hating me. Some of you are probably familiar with the story. And she said, you know, some people think it's gay some people think it's strange for a gay Hollywood entertainer to be with a Republican president and laughing together. And she very eloquently made the point that when I say be kind to others, I don't mean just the ones that I agree with or the ones that believe the same as I do. I mean be kind to everyone. It's a nice little clip that wraps up everything we've talked about today. Take a moment and look at that CBS Evening News report. As we consider that, and we're close to Thanksgiving, let me just say that anger and gratitude, bitterness and grace cannot coexist together within you as a person. Keep that in mind. A lot of studies been done. A secret to joy and happiness is gratitude, and it will not coexist with anger and bitterness. And I will leave you with this final quote from Jackie Robinson and encourage you to go Google Ellen George W. Bush. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate that. I understand Warren's been gracious enough